Welcome back to Lucor Automotive Services. Today we're dealing with a little bit of a misfire issue, I think. As you can see, my muffler is shaking and the car sounds a little odd. Sounds a little bit like a Subaru if I'm honest, but it's not supposed to sound that way. So today, we're gonna do some troubleshooting. We're gonna talk about the easy way and the proper way to figure out what's going on with a misfire on a modern coil on plug design car. Stick with me, be right back. Back in the olden days when you had a distributor and wires, figuring out a misfire was a little tricky. You didn't really have anything that, typically speaking, would give you any kind of telemetry. You had a piece that was spinning around, distributing spark as it did, the wires took it to the spark plugs, and everything made fire, right? Well, on modern stuff, in this case, semi-modern stuff, you have a lot more information that you can work from, but there are still some unknowns that you gotta worry about and some variables that you gotta take into account. This vehicle we're working on today is my 2003 Pontiac Vibe GT. You probably haven't recognized this car because you probably haven't watched the video that I took this thing on a really gigantic road trip on, but we did a 2,500 mile, $2,500 car journey on it. Car ran great, however it had some problems and it sat around for quite a long time. Now I've got it all fixed. I fired it up in the parking lot and it sounds like that. So we gotta figure out what's going on, what do we need to do to fix it, what parts we need, and then we gotta fix it. This is a pretty high performance motor that's underneath this, at least in terms of early 2000s 4-cylinders. This is a 2ZZGE. It's a high revving, high compression motor, but this same kind of conversation and the same kind of troubleshooting will work for a variety of cars. Anything that's got a coil on plug system for spark, this same exact process will work for you. Let me go ahead and shut this car off, and then we need to get inside the car, plug it into the OBD2 port that's under the dash, pull up our codes and see what kind of telemetry we've got. As you can see here, we do have a check engine light on, so maybe the computer has already detected what's going on, in which case life is good. It'll tell us where we're looking for. All right, in my case, right here's our OBD2 plug. This can be in a variety of locations depending on the vehicle, but they're all gonna look like this. They're all gonna have that same shape of connection. Okay, now, first off, let's go full disclosure here. I am gonna be using a Snap-on Veris Edge. You probably don't have a $5,000 scan tool. However, most of what I'm going to be doing is probably going to be similar to what you would get out of a scan tool from any kind of auto parts store. Even maybe an OBD2 Bluetooth scan tool would do the same kind of thing. You just plug into your scan tool, figure out what way you need to interact with it, and ready to go. Okay, power on. Scan. And we're going to go to Pontiac Manual ND 2003 Vibe, and this is an L code motor. Depending on what motor you have in this car, if it's a GT or a non-GT, that makes a huge difference. So we're going to go to the GT version. Don't need to fill that out. We're going to look at engine, and we're going to look at code menu, display codes. Now again, depending on what your system is, this may be similar, it may be completely dissimilar. A lot of things you're just going to automatically plug in and it's just going to pull the codes whatever they are. It depends on what your scanner is and how fancy it is. So, look at current codes. We have a catalyst efficiency low bank 1 code, P0303. Okay, well that's going to be a code that we've seen off and on in this vehicle for a long time. It's either going to be a catalytic converter or an O2 sensor. It's most likely going to be an O2 sensor because we've already replaced the cat. Now we did do this with a universal cat, a high flow universal cat instead of the factory unit, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. However, this P0303 is probably not going to give us anything as far as a misfire goes. So if we go back here, we look at history codes. And again, all we have is that cat code in there. There's nothing else about any kind of a misfire or anything along those lines. So let's look at something else. Start this car up. You can definitely hear it's not happy, right? mean, it does actually kind of sound like a Subaru, but that's not the way it's supposed to sound. Got a data display. Misfire data. Now this should give us real-time data on whether or not we're seeing any misfires across all the different banks. Depending on what kind of car it is, it's going to have 4 cylinders, 6 cylinders, or 8 cylinders. Cylinder 1. Cylinder 3. All right, now we're misfiring. Cylinder 2 is not happy. Part of mechanicking is knowing, but part of the mechanicking is also senses, listening and feeling. You can hear that thing sounding completely different, and you can occasionally hear it pop. That's gonna be a misfire. So, we got a cylinder 2 misfire that we gotta hunt down, figure out what's going on there. First thing you're going to want to check is easy stuff. Make sure that there's nothing loose, nothing's come unplugged. Make sure all the things that are supposed to be there are there. Now, I haven't changed anything with this car since I drove it last, so everything should still be plugged in. But with this car, the arrangement it is with an inline 4-cylinder, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 all across the top here. So you've got your plugs that lead your connection to your coils. Make sure those are all good. Make sure your bolts are tight, nothing's wrong there. So that does not seem to be our problem. Basically, you need 3 things to make fire happen and make a car run. You need air, fuel, and spark. Now you do also need compression, and you need those things at the right time, but air, fuel, spark. There's nothing that's showing anything whatsoever about fueling problems, so it's probably not a fuel injector, but if you do have a fuel code as well, you could worry about maybe having an injector that's not doing well. But I don't think that's where we're going to be looking at. So because of our code, and it says it's code, or it's cylinder number 2, that's going to be this cylinder here. And what we're going to do is we're going to solve 2 things at the same time. What happens here is you don't know whether or not the spark plug is misfiring, or if the spark plug is bad, or if the coil is bad. And there's really no easy way to figure that out, except what you can do is you can mismatch those devices. So what you can do is you can swap coil number 2 to coil number 3 plug, and that'll tell you whether or not it's that coil. Because if the misfire moves from cylinder 2 to cylinder 3, it's a coil. If it doesn't, then it's probably a spark plug. So, next step, swap coils. Just a second. Make sure you do disconnect the battery before you start working on this. But mine is a pretty simple thing. There's just one hold down bolt that holds each coil in place, and I've got a 10mm socket. These should not be ooga-dooga, by the way. They should be pretty easy to pull out. So, pulls out. Disconnect our pigtail off of our coil. Pull coil out. Doesn't look too bad, not covered in the oil at all. Doesn't look burnt, but just because it doesn't look bad doesn't mean it isn't bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap that with the cylinder 3 coil, which is right next to it. So pull that one out. Again, no real visible signs of any problems. Now, at this point in time, I actually am going to go ahead and put new spark plugs in this just because I actually have a set of spark plugs here. So I'm going to skip this step. But what you would typically want to do in addition to this is you could swap this spark plug out to another coil. So if you want to move this plug to this hole, that would tell you whether or not that spark plug is going to be an issue. If it's a spark plug issue, that spark plug, if you move it to cylinder 1, will then start showing a misfire on cylinder 1. So you can actually troubleshoot two things at the same time. Well, looking at things spark plug wise, they don't look terrible. They do have a little tiny electrode there, but that's because they're iridiums, so they have a very fine tip on them. But maybe. So we're going to go ahead and swap these around and we'll see what happens. I do have a set of plugs, but I'm not going to put them in just yet, just so I can prove this point. I'm going to put these plugs in opposite holes. That way we can see if the misfire moves to 1, then we know it's an issue with the spark plug. If it's an issue with the coil and it moves from 2 to 3, then we know it's a coil. Easy as that. Solving two variables at the same time. Alright. So number 2 coil is back in 3 hole, and 3 coil goes in 2 hole. Screw these back down. Okay. Let's fire this thing back up. See where my misfire went. Yeah, it's still misfiring. It didn't fix itself. Dang it. That's a good thing, because if it fixed itself, then we got all kinds of other weird issues going on here. Now, I realize that there are other issues that could also lead to a misfire. You could have some problems that are beyond ignition control. We're just going to hope that that's not the case. Otherwise, this is going to get to be a very long fix-it series. Okay. Misfires are on cylinder 3. Cylinder 1 looks like it's good. So it's not a spark plug issue. It's a cylinder 3 misfire, which is going to probably 99% of the time be a coil, because we moved it from cylinder 2 to cylinder 3. Easy as that. So we need to put a new coil in that number. Typically speaking, most people will just replace coils as you need to. They do tend to be rather pricey, depending on where you're getting them from and what kind of vehicle you're working on. Most people will replace the coils one at a time as they go bad. As far as I can tell, these are all original coils that are on this car, which has 250 some odd thousand miles on it. So not a big surprise that the coil's gone bad, but they are, as I said, a little bit pricey. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace the one that's bad, and we're going to get that thing replaced. And I'm also going to go ahead and put in a brand new set of spark plugs, because I don't know how many miles are on these. They do look kind of cruddy, and I'm basically already there anyway. You've already basically seen the entire process for replacing spark plugs. You pull the coil out, you put your spark plug wrench down the hole, your spark plug socket down the hole, you spin the spark plug out, you put the new one back in the hole, you tighten it up, put the coil back on, bing bang boom, you're done. So let me order a coil real quick. We'll get that thing replaced and hopefully fix our car. Okay, well, new coil came in. It's a Delphi unit. I did not get a new one. Now, oddly enough, because this does say Pontiac on it, it is a Pontiac Vibe GT. However, the engine is a Toyota, so things can get a little bit weird. So I would have probably ordered a coil from Toyota if I wanted to get a factory original Toyota coil. But I'm going to go ahead and go with an aftermarket one because it's available and I can get this done right now, and I'd like to drive this car. So I've got a Delphi unit, GN10333, and it does look absolutely identical to the one that I've got in the car, which is good. So let's disconnect our battery again, pull coils, or pull coil, verify our part is identical before we replace it, and then get it replaced. Alright, well, these look dang similar to me. Same connection, same bolt pattern. Definitely make sure you have the proper part before you do anything with the old part. Lesson from somebody who screwed this up before. But everything's the same, depth the same, connections the same, bolts in the same. Same to me. So let's get this guy tossed in here. car's actually really easy to work on. Rather happy with this car, I gotta be honest with you. For a cheap little beater car that I bought for specifically for a road trip, it's actually quite fun. And again, no crazy ooga-doogas on there, just cinch it down tight. All right, let's reconnect our battery, turn the key and see if we fix something. Sounds better. Sounds much better. 0 misfires across all 4 cylinders. All right, now we do still have this code that's throwing a check engine light. I'm gonna guess that that's still gonna be our P0303 code, but let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. Make sure there's nothing else crazy going on here. Oh hey, it did actually eventually find that misfire. That's exciting. Okay, so this is good news. So this did actually detect that misfire, maybe because we let it run there in that misfire mode long enough that it did finally kick that code. And then it does have the P0303 code. So we know this one is an issue we're gonna have to probably still deal with, but this one, as of right now, is fixed. Now a lot of you are gonna say, Austin, what if I don't have a $5,000 scan tool? Or what if I don't have the ability to do this? Well, that last little bit there where I let it fire long enough to be able to kick a code would come up with any kind of a code scanner. If it doesn't do that, then you're gonna be a little bit of guess and check kind of work. What you would want to do first is replace the spark plugs because they're cheap and they're easy. Typically speaking, you're gonna have, I don't know, somewhere between $2 and $10 per spark plug, depending on what you're working on. In my case, they're not that expensive. Just put spark plugs in the dang thing. Depending on how old your vehicle is, how many miles are on it, there's a range of different spark plugs you can get involved in. I just put a set of OEs back in this thing, and it seems like it's perfectly fine. Typically speaking, most of these guys are gonna run like a 60,000 mile spark plug. If you're gonna run something fancy schmancy, it might get it to 100,000 miles. With 250,000 miles on this car already, I probably don't need to have 100,000 mile spark plugs in it, and they're super easy to replace, so doing a spark plug replacement is not a big deal. But what you would want to do, step one, if you don't have that code, would be replace spark plugs. And then at that point in time, you're going to have to troubleshoot to be able to figure out if it's a coil or if it's a spark plug. The other thing you can do is if you happen to have a device to be able to read temperatures, like an optical device to read temperatures, what you can do is you can actually hit the exhaust, which on this car you can't do because the exhaust is on the backside. But if you happen to have something like a Honda or a Toyota, which is reversed of this, where a lot of the Nissans actually, where the exhaust is in the front. Actually, I've got a Nissan motor I can show you over here. So this is a QR25DE out of a Nissan Sentra SER Spec V. Don't ask, it's a long story. But this is a build motor that's gonna be for a car that I've totally forgotten about and wasted a whole pile of money on. But as you can see, there are header pipes up here in the front. So you have cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can actually use a thermometer and read the temperatures across all 4 pipes. Whichever pipe is colder is where your misfire is. It's fancy, isn't it? Now it doesn't have to be anything super crazy. If you want to buy something super expensive for a optical thermometer, you can do that, but that's a neat way to be able to do it. The other trick you can use is you could use water. If you get a bottle of water, squirt bottle, and squirt those tubes and see which one bubbles, see which one boils off that water fast. Because if it's got a misfire, it's usually going to be a colder tube, and it's going to slowly, it will heat up slower, and will typically speaking not disappear that water quite as fast. Not quite so scientific, but it works. All right, so we've got our misfire taken care of, I believe, at least at idle, and at least sitting still. The next thing we're going to do is verify our repair by taking it for a drive and making sure that there's no random misfires happening. So this could be interesting. I know it's raining outside, but I'm going to fire this thing up. We're going to go for a test drive real quick to make sure that there's nothing else going on. Give me a second. Let me clean up after myself and put all my tools away, put all my spares away, my throw away, my old parts, and we'll go for a drive real quick. Much better. Nice and rhythmic. Doesn't have that random... Now, depending on the car, that could be part of what you're looking for. But in this case, I want that nice purring sound. Maybe a little bit of raspiness. We'll give her some throttle, make sure everything's good. But let's get on the road, verify our repair. This is going to be a tiny bit tricky because this car is a stick shift and it is a close ratio 6-speed, so there's going to be a lot of shifting getting up to decent speeds here, but even just backing it up out of the shop, I can tell you I do not feel any kind of a misfire at all. Let me get up to the front of the shop here and we'll get this thing on the road. Yes, I'm up to temperature. No more misfire. Purrs like a kitten, holding 4,000 RPMs comfortably. Now I do also have my computer with me here that I am totally not going to look at while I'm driving, but it is right here. So I can actually watch, in my case, I can actually watch real-time telemetry. Depending on what you've got as far as a code scanner goes, you may be able to see that. A lot of the OBD2 scanners that you're going to get that Bluetooth to your phone will be able to show you real-time diagnostic stuff, and we'll be able to show you that kind of thing. Now your typical cheap Walmart scanner is not going to be able to, or is not going to be able to show you that stuff in real time. It's going to be it's going to save a code and then be able to, you got to go back through the whole process to do it. But if you've got a decent scanner or you've got software in your phone that allows you to see real time, what you can do is you can actually just look at this stuff as you're driving down the road, and if it starts kicking misfire codes, you deal with them as it comes. All right, one more little spirited test drive. I love this little car. I gotta be honest, I love this little car. Never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that I would want to enjoy a little Pontiac Vibe, but I tell you what, these little GTs have got some fun hiding underneath a otherwise very boring and mundane body. Well, there you go. Repair verified. Now, if this was a customer's vehicle, I could call Mr. Customer and say, Mr. Customer, your car is done. Come pay your bill. Get this thing out of here. But this is mine, so I'm going to get it out of here and I'm going to go enjoy it. Unfortunately, as you can tell, it's getting cold and rainy and terrible. It's about to become an ice storm here in Columbus, Ohio, so that should be a fun way to spend the weekend. But we've repaired the Pontiac Vibe GT. This kind of thing works on basically every vehicle that you're going to find that is a coil unplugged design, which is essentially everything modern. The whole idea is the fact that it gives you more data, so you're not just kind of throwing darts like you could before, and they've got much more sensitive spark control with coil unplugged design than they do with something old school like, say, one of those things, an AMX, or anything old school. There you go. She's done, finished, send her home. Well, in my case, drive it home. Thanks for being here, folks. I appreciate it. If you guys are interested in this kind of thing, if you want to see some of the more like basic repair type stuff from us, let me know. I'm certainly willing to film some stuff. I'm sure Rich will as well. Have a great weekend. I hope you're safe. Hope you're warm. We'll see you on Monday. Take care.